All right, we got week 7 lines and lineups. Holden Kushner here alongside RotoGrinders legend, Dan Bach. And then, of course, we got Vegas Insider legend. Huh?
Stop it.
What are we, off to a hot start here? You're just
already just
taming it?
Getting me fired up here.
The show's gone to hell. We're 10 seconds in. Kevin Rogers from Vegas Insider. How are you, boys? What's going on? You know what? Before we get into any how are you, boys, K-Raj comes on. He starts complaining about all the flags in the NFL. Dan's like, it happens. I'm saying it's enough already, but I'm not going to complain about it today. Just real quick, because we were looking back at the Monday night game, an egregious call, changing the lines there. You know, K-Raj, I know you're passionate about this. You start with this. Like every week, do we have to just start digging into the referees and how many flags they're going to throw in this game? Can we get an edge that way now?
Yes, and good morning, gentlemen. I had Detroit, so I'm not complaining about how it ended last night. But at the same time, I mean, number one, the one that really got to me was the unsportsmanlike conduct, unnecessary roughness, whatever it was in the first half on that catch by the Packers receiver, and the Lions safety drilled him. It looked bad, but what is he supposed to do? You know, and they call that flag. You have the hands to the face that wasn't hands to the face. You had the catch out of the backfield late that it was a little questionable. That one wasn't concrete. But at the same time, the Lions had chances. You know, the first possession, Stafford throws that long pass down the field, and they end up getting tackled inside the 10 and get held to a field goal. I mean, they had opportunities, the Lions, to blow the Packers out, and they didn't. The officiating wasn't good, but Detroit can also look at themselves and how they blew the game.
And it really wasn't only that game, Dan. I mean, we had flags on every single play in the Jets' final drive against the Cowboys. It really is something we need to – I guess you're always taking into account, but it seems like it's times 10 this year where you need to start looking at the referees and really figuring out how many flags are getting thrown. And can that even help you in DFS?
Well, I don't think it moves the needle too much in DFS, but I do think as just a society in terms of, you know, the fact that we watch these games and every single game has 30 different angles for you to look at a replay. And there's just social media. Immediately you've got opinions coming out about things. I mean, it's a different world today than it was even 10 years ago watching football. And I think that kind of maybe magnifies the problems a little bit more. But, you know, a perfect example of like one mistake that they're not really correcting too well, and that's, you know, this review of pass interference. And they just have not been overturning very many of them at all. And then, of course, you had that spot late in that game last night where it was clear pass interference and the team didn't throw the flag. And I think they didn't throw the flag because there's no confidence that they're actually going to overturn these things. And I think that's part of the problem here. But, you know, I just kind of go back to it. It's the other thing to look at, too, is a lot of the best officials, they make more money being on TV and radio talking about the officials rather than actually being one. So I think the best solution, add more officials, put more people on the field. What does it hurt? If it doesn't get in the way, why not have, you know, two referees in the backfield? You don't necessarily need one. And get more eyeballs on the actual play itself. And it should, in theory, you know, lead to better officiating, I think. But I'm not too worried about it. It's just the world we live in today.
Yeah, I'm not freaking out about it. It's just something you definitely want to look at. And if you got a bad beat, you're obviously going to be freaking out about it. Here's the 5 games we're doing today. And actually, I thought last week's slate was garbage for the most part. Love this slate. We got the Saints and the Bears at 4:25 Eastern. We'll start with that one. Ravens, Seahawks, another 4:25 game. Texans at the Colts at 1 o'clock. Rams at the Falcons at 1 o'clock. And then another couple of garbage teams. I guess the Giants aren't garbage anymore, but the Cardinals at the Giants. And we've been targeting DFS a lot of these bad games that have ended up scoring some points. K-Raj, let's start with you on this 4:25 game. We got the Saints 3-point underdogs at Chicago. The line stayed the same there. The over-under is 38.5. You got the Saints pretty good against the spread, 4-2 so far. Their defense, Cam Jordan, has just been magnificent. I think people overlook what their punter, Thomas Morstead, has done. He was pinning the Jaguars back time and time again. They got a good special teams. After a slow start, K-Raj, this defense has come on, and this will probably be ugly up there in Chicago.
Yeah, they played very well, and Teddy Bridgewater, 4-0 straight up and against the spread as a starter since taking over for Drew Brees. We obviously don't count that Rams game. He came in relief, but the defense, like you mentioned, Holden, has been fantastic. And, you look back at the last few weeks, what they've done, allowing 6 points to Jacksonville. They allowed 24 to Tampa Bay, but the Buccaneers scored a touchdown the final minute of that game. So, that number was inflated a bit. Held the Cowboys to 10 points, and even Seattle scored a lot of touchdowns late in that game after they got into a huge hole. So the Saints defense has been very good. What I find interesting with this line, there's a second straight week that we're questioning why the Saints are an underdog on the road. Last week with Jacksonville, that you kind of wondered. I fell into this trap with Jacksonville. I said they got to be the play since they're favored. They haven't been really good at home. I know they beat the Titans earlier in the year. But why is it this way? So I'm going to go Jacksonville. It didn't work out. It was a 6-6 game, and New Orleans scored a touchdown to win it. But I look at Chicago coming off the bye, off the London game, and off a loss to Oakland, where they came back and they end up losing to a Raiders team that maybe isn't as bad as we thought they were. But at least defensively at home, they've allowed 10 points to Green Bay, 6 points to Minnesota. And defensively, the Chicago team is still very good. They're an elite level in this league. I know you probably look at the under just because both these defenses have been very good, but I think I'd lean towards the Bears here, coming off the bye and seeing a lot of people will be on New Orleans as a public underdog this week because of what they've done and because of their record. It's better than Chicago, but the Bears, I think that they could pull this one out at home.
What about the Trubisky factor? If he plays, if he doesn't play, and of course Kyle Long is done. Once again, he's on IR, so it's a little blow to the line, but how much does Trubisky, once we get final word on him, how much does it move it?
I mean, I'm sure that you will see, I'm guessing maybe like a half point. I mean, I can't think this guy is worth a point or two. I just don't see that. And obviously, even in the Minnesota game, they still were fine even without him. And this Vikings offense finally blew up this past weekend against the Eagles. And you saw what Chicago did to them, really hold them down a few weeks ago. But I think that not say that Bridgewater's due for a bad game, and not like saying that he's been lighting the world on fire because he didn't have great stats his first few games before the Tampa Bay game. But I think that Chicago's defense can stifle New Orleans. And look, it's just about the Bears getting some kind of offense going. And New Orleans defense has been great, but I think Chicago could get them. But also this could be a 21-17 game. I'm not calling for a Bears blowout, but I think that Chicago will get this one if Trubisky plays or even if he doesn't play.
All right, so Dan, on a DFS note in this game, it is going to be lower line at 38.5 as it stands right now. Let's get into the Saints and start with Alvin Kamara. I mean, he's not winning you weeks. He's basically what is it? He's a floor play. He had 37, 23 in the last 2 weeks. He's ended up around 12 and 17. What's going on with Kamara? Is this a spot where we want to target him since nobody's going to be on him? Because it's concerning in DFS. The price tag, $7,500 on DraftKings. Do I want to invest in Kamara this week?
I don't think so. I mean, it's hard to get too excited about a team that's got an 18-point implied team total and salaries that on guys like Kamara and Thomas, which are upper echelon. I mean, $7,500 on DraftKings and 79, I think, for Thomas, 75 for Kamara. So it's just too much. I mean, the plays here, if any, are coming from Chicago's side of things. Allen Robinson has been, a consistent producer for him, playing about 90% of snaps. He's only 5,500 on DraftKings, 7 or more targets every game. If he scores a touchdown, he's going to make it. And then you've got two really, cheap running backs. I have no faith in either of them, in Montgomery and Cohen at 48 and 4,600. But it wouldn't shock me in tournament play if one of those two guys kind of broke out and could be a value play, but tournament only. The only thing that I do think we need to really look at for kind of cash games, head-to-head 50-50s, are the defenses here. Yeah. The Bears, they struggled versus Oakland, but the 2 games before then they had 17 and 21 DraftKings points, and they're coming in at 3,000 over on DK, 4,500 on FanDuel. They're squarely in play, and again, I don't think this Bears offense is all that great themselves, and you can get the Saints for just a little bit cheaper. I'd side with the Bears at home, and I agree with K. Rogers' take that maybe Bridgewater, 4-0 against the spread. Is that trend really going to continue off a bye week? I like Chicago here too.
Just real quick, K-Raj, getting back to your over-under there, you get a little sense that you think it's going to go over. I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? So if it does go over, do both teams push it over, or does one team pull away in your estimation?
No, I think it stays under.
You do think it stays under?
Yeah, right. I just think that the way these defenses have played, and since you don't have an explosive offense in Chicago, and the Saints have proved they could win low-scoring games with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, that I could still see even 4 or 5 touchdowns put up in this game. But I really can't see a 38-28 game or something ridiculous like that. I think more so on Chicago's side. Like, I don't see where Chicago is going to score 30-something points. But also, I think the Bears can win this game 21-17, 20-17, 20-16, somewhere there, and stay under the total.
Yeah, I just think that the Saints can play to the pace of the team they're going against. If they need to be more offensive minded, we saw it against Tampa Bay, and Michael Thomas went absolutely ham that day. But we've also seen if they need to grind it out, they're fine doing that. So in this game, if we thought Chicago was going to be able to score 28, 35 points, then yeah, like maybe the Saints could match them. But I just don't expect that flow to take place. And the scenario of the Saints like blowing out the Bears, very, very small. So I think K-Raj nailed it.
I actually prefer the Saints D if we're going to talk about cash games there. I just, Long is down now. If Trubisky comes back, we got a turnover or two at a minimum. I love the special team. So I think this will be a really interesting game. Maybe not as much from a DFS perspective, although I do think, one player is going to have a big game in all likelihood. He'll stand out, whether Tariq Cohen or whoever the hell it is, or the Saints or the Bears D. But I think from a betting perspective, this is the most intriguing game that is on the slate. But let's get to our next game, also a 425 game. Ravens at the Seahawks. Baltimore's 1-5 against the spread so far. Then we got Russell Wilson, 17 touchdowns, no interceptions. We had Mahomes and Watson last week. It's not going to get the same billing, K-Raj, but we have 2 spectacular quarterbacks here. Russell Wilson, the MVP through this point, and Lamar Jackson, who just ran for 152 yards, threw for over 200. That ain't happening this week, but it opened at 3.5. Seattle is now a 4-point favorite. The over-under is 50.5. Let's start with that game total, because I think that's interesting. Throughout the years, the Ravens defense been great. Seahawks defense been great. Well, Seahawks have a couple of holes there, and the Ravens, we've seen that they can be beat as well.
Yeah, and when you look at what Seattle has put up, they come back from that 20-6 hole against Cleveland on Sunday, and even these numbers holding they're putting up, 32 against Cleveland, 30 against the Rams, 27 against Arizona, 27 against the Saints, 28 against Pittsburgh. This team can score. And even defensively, you throw out the Arizona game, they've given up 26 or more for the last 5 games. And now, again, it goes back to, like we always say, does this continue this week or not? And you go on the flip side with Baltimore. This is a very tough team to figure out, the Ravens, that, as you mentioned, 1-5 against the number. The only game they covered was that Dolphins blowout back in week 1. And the last 5 weeks, 3 of them, they've been laying a touchdown or more. Now you get them in the underdog role. They're 0-1 against the spread as an underdog in that Kansas City loss back in week 3. But also you look at the competition they played. Cincinnati hasn't won a game yet. Pittsburgh, 1 win. The Arizona Cardinals, who had them on the ropes a little bit, and Arizona's finally won a few in a row, and the Dolphins are a disaster. So really, and even Cleveland, who we can't figure out, they gave up 40 points to them. So you say, all right, Baltimore's the top team in the AFC North, but really, what have they proven so far? And the only good team they played, they lost to in Kansas City. With all that being said, I think maybe the Ravens, because you look at them as potentially undervalued this week. Seattle's not covered a game at home yet this season. They're 0-3 against the spread. That Rams game, they closed as 1.5-point favorites. They won by 1. They probably should have lost outright if Zerline makes that field goal at the end. They lose outright to New Orleans. Even Cincinnati gave them problems back in week 1. For some reason, this team has played better on the road than at home. I don't really have a huge opinion on the total, but as far as a side, Baltimore could be worth a look this week after all the struggles they've had against the number.
All right, I want to get back to you on this game just a little bit on the side, but Dan, here we go. You got the Ravens 4th against the run. Seattle's been good against the run. They're waiting for them really to step up. They've been 11th. I want to get to the running backs in this game, though, because we have a higher total. Chris Carson has just been matchup proof. I mean, he stopped fumbling the ball. He's an elite running back now. He's bell cow status at this point. On the other side, with the Ravens, Mark Ingram, you have to take in the Lamar Jackson factor. Start with the running games for me. FanDuel, DraftKings, do you prefer one over the other? And is Chris Carson an elite play, even though he's going up against a very tough defense?
Yeah, I think Carson's pretty much solidified himself as the bell cow, and we don't see a lot of those in the NFL these days. I mean, 3 straight games over 20 carries and over 100 yards, and he also does catch 4 or 5 passes out in the backfield. And, super playable. The salary is still reasonable enough. It's starting to climb up. And I do think Baltimore's defense might be a little bit better still than people think against the run. I mean, they're ranked the 10th toughest fantasy points allowed to running backs, and that included that 80-yard run that Chubb had. If you took that out of the mix, they'd rank even higher. So I'm fine with Carson. I think he's going to be pretty chalky after what we saw again last week. And then Ingram on the other end, I just don't play him. There's not enough upside there. You've got Lamar Jackson, who's rushed for over 100 yards twice this season, can call his own number on the goal line. And just the ceiling is really low. The only bust-out game he had was versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs just gave Carlos Hyde a 20-carry, 120-yard game last week. That's how bad that defense is. So I've got no faith in Mark Ingram. I don't know why people keep playing him. He's like 30% owned in the Millie Maker every single week, but not going to be on my lineups, that's for sure.
Well, then Lamar Jackson, 6,800 DraftKings. It's Russell Wilson, 6,600. 17 touchdowns, no interceptions. But Lamar, on the other hand, who's to say he's not going to run for 75 yards in this game? You prefer either one? Take the $200 into account.
Yeah, I mean, I think it somewhat matters where you're playing. Like on DraftKings, Russell Wilson's the 4th highest salary, but he's the top salary guy on FanDuel, so I'm definitely not playing him there. I mean, I like Lamar a little bit more just because you've got greater upside in that run game. And we'll see if Marquise Brown comes back. I mean, that's going to be a huge weapon for him this season, and I think they're really going to need him here. So, if he comes back, I think that definitely, raises his upside even a little bit more. And then the tight end spot, Mark Andrews. I mean, you look at Seattle, 4th most fantasy points allowed to tight ends. He's too cheap on DraftKings at 4.9. 6.7 is pretty fair, but there's only about 3 tight ends we really want to play this week. So I think that's an interesting play. And then the last one that I want to throw out there too is maybe getting a little bit sneaky with, especially if Brown is out, on some of these cheaper receivers for Baltimore. If you really are looking to save, Willie Snead is like minimum salary on FanDuel. And he still saw, I think, like 5 targets last game. And if they need to put up points, if they are trying to play from behind, he's going to get peppered with looks. So I like him in tournament formats as just a super cheap stack with Lamar, but probably only if Marquise Brown is out.
Hey, K-Raj, the line open Seattle 3.5-point favorites. It's been pushed up to 4 now. Where do you see this line going? Is it going to settle here for a little bit, or can you wait a little bit and see where it goes?
Probably with what we've seen, I'm looking right now, 3.5 is the total with or the side rather. 3.5. It's opened at 4. I mean, I think it'll probably stay around that point. I'd see it more go towards Seattle than Baltimore. I just don't think that this line will get a lot of heavy movement. It's a tough game, guys. I mean, it's really tough. I'm telling you Baltimore as my lean, but I don't really think that it would be my strongest play of the week just because. But it's just hard to ignore what Seattle has done at home from the standpoint of not really blowing anyone out. And not say that the Ravens are due for a cover. That's not the case. But I'd like to see what Baltimore can do now in their second opportunity as an underdog and what Lamar Jackson can do against this defense that has been a little bit eaten up over the last few weeks. But it'll be a big challenge, though, for Baltimore's defense against the Seattle team that you mentioned Russell Wilson and the way he's been playing, that this Seahawks team can score. And we'll see what Baltimore has in store for them this week.
Yeah, and I misspoke. This line opened at 4. Now it's Seattle -3.5. 1 o'clock game, Texans, Colts. Indianapolis, 1-point favorite, opened at 2.5. They were 2.5-point favorites. Over-under is 47.5. So, Kevin, right back to you on this one. Texas coming off an impressive win in Kansas City, so people are taking that into account. The Colts had a bye, didn't they? I mean, I don't remember watching this weekend. So Marlon Mack gets to heal up a little bit. T.Y. Hilton gets a chance to heal up a little bit. They're going to be going at full strength. Nobody gives Indianapolis the credit they deserve. Their defense, they really started building it up early last season. They went out and they drafted. It's coming together now. I think the surprise here is the offense. If they can get that game going against the Texans, that's the side I'm on. How about you, K-Raj? Give us a detailed breakdown of the Colts and the Texans in Indianapolis.
I know we like to use cliches in the broadcasting world, so I'll throw one out there that you got to believe that Houston has this game circled on the calendar since the Texans got knocked out by the Colts in the wild card round last year. Obviously, no Andrew Luck this time around. But, this is another, again, this is what we love about the NFL. All these games have so many different storylines to them. It's not like college where you expect a blowout, where you look at this game and Houston 3-0 against the spread on the road this year, should have beaten New Orleans in the opener. You can argue they probably should have lost to the Chargers. They came back and won that game, and they dig out of a hole to beat Kansas City this past Sunday. But Deshaun Watson is playing very well for the Texans. This team has put up over 80 points the last 2 weeks against the Falcons and the Chiefs. They're going to face a better defense this week with the Colts. And for Indianapolis, what I wonder is, coming off the bye after the Chiefs win, that did the bye maybe interrupt some momentum for this team? You go from a double-digit underdog at Kansas City to now a short favorite against the Texans. And this team, or these two teams, played that crazy overtime game last year in Indianapolis, which was a must-win for both these teams after a slow start. And the Texans kicked 2 field goals in overtime to beat the Colts. But I think that I got to ride Houston here, that the Colts, even though they come off that win against the Chiefs, I say, am I getting that team, or am I getting the team that dug themselves a 14-0 hole to Oakland the week before? So which Colts team am I getting? I'm going to take the better quarterback and take the Texans here.
Both teams coming off a win over the Chiefs. Every week, Dan Bach, Deshaun Watson seems to be an elite option. You've got Jacoby Brissett, who, if you started him over the last 4 weeks, you've had a couple of really nice weeks there. Let's start with the quarterback play here. Colts, good defense. Texans, I think, could be exploited a bit, but are either one of these guys on your radar?
Not Brissett. There's just other options we can play in that price range. Watson, absolutely got to be in play. I'm not going to likely go there in my cash games this week. I just think there's better price per dollar options for us. But, very simple. It's just you've got DeAndre Hopkins waiting to have a big game. And like Kevin alluded to, I remember stacking this game up last year, and it was one of my best weeks. And you can do that because we've had a lot of high-scoring fantasy games from these two teams. You can look at DeAndre Hopkins. He's got touchdowns in 3 straight games against the Colts, and he's just way overdue to have that kind of tournament-winning upside in games. So I think it's coming sooner rather than later. We saw Will Fuller last week drop 3 touchdowns. He's down to 6.3 on FanDuel. I think you can play him there, but DraftKings still really jacked up that price after that big game 2 weeks ago at 6.2K. So definitely a guy that I'm probably not playing on DraftKings. And then the Colts side, I think we got to look at Marlon Mack here. He's 6K on DraftKings, 7.1 on FanDuel, and I think he could be in store for a big game. A week off is only going to help him get healthier. He's had 20 or more carries in 3 of 5. So off the bye week, I like him. And then lastly, T.Y. Hilton. Nobody looks forward to playing the Texans more than T.Y. Hilton. 31.9, 18.5, 37.5, and 29.5. Those are his fantasy outputs in 4 of his last 5 games versus the Texans. He has owned this team. Now, obviously, Andrew Luck being quarterback versus Jacoby Brissett. Might not translate into that same sort of production, but he is really cheap. Sub 6K on DraftKings. I think he might be chalk this week.
5,900 on DraftKings for T.Y. Hilton. Who the hell would have thought that? And Fuller, I love it. He's always a tournament option. But DeAndre Hopkins, keep waiting for him to break out. I mean, at this point, is even a cash game option. The price this week got better. Yeah, Cooper Kupp is going to be cheaper than him, especially on DraftKings. At this point, maybe Nook is the tournament option, and it's the one that gets you over the top this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. Like, this guy is way too good of a receiver. And if you actually look at some metrics, I think J.J. Zacharyson tweeted out just his goal line looks are way down. Like, at this point in time, I think last year he had like 15, or maybe it was 15 through the entire year. And I think he's had like 2 inside the 5. So just the flow has not really gone his way. But again, this is where you look for some of that positive regression. It's going to turn in his way at some point in time because his skill hasn't diminished. His quarterback is not any worse than he's ever been. It's just a matter of time before it comes, and it will for DeAndre Hopkins. And you want to be on it when it does.
K-Raj, game total here, 47.5. Discuss amongst yourself.
Now, Dan brought up am I on? Do I have to talk to you about it or talk with myself about it?
I'd love for you to talk about yourself with yourself because it might be really entertaining. So, right. How many personalities you got, buddy?
I don't know. I got to see. Let me look back at my banner here.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, you had the playoff game last year was 21-7, and the game in Indianapolis last year 37-34. Both these teams had over 400 yards of offense. Even the game in Houston the second time around was a 3-point game. It was 24-21. So, again, you say, are we going to get that high-scoring game? Now, the one thing I'll note to you guys is looking back at this 5 of the last 6 meetings, again, Andrew Luck played, so we got to put that out there. But 5 of the last 6 meetings finished under the total. So maybe that overtime game we saw last year in Indianapolis was a bit of the outlier as opposed to what you would normally see. I mean, when you think of some of these scores, 20-14, 22-13, 24-21, 22-17. So a lot of these games were not as high scoring. And I'm going to go more with the thought process of, well, the Colts have played better defensively than they have scoring points, where Houston has faced 2 crap defenses the last 2 weeks. We know Atlanta's defense isn't good at all. We saw what they did against Arizona last week, and the Chiefs' defense hasn't been good. So maybe this is one of those games that you end up somewhere in the low to mid 20s and it stays under the total.
Yeah. And again, the line moved. It was open at 2.5, and now it's Indianapolis -1, but the over under really moved a half a point, right? Maybe 47. I'm seeing it 48 a couple of places. I don't know how much it's going to move before game time, but it's interesting to see you guys kind of on 2 different sides. K-Rod, you think it's going under, and Dan, are you on a different side?
No, I don't know if I necessarily have a strong opinion on it. I just think that you've got really cheap guys on the Colts side of things. I mean, like you say, Hilton is going to easily be one of the more popular plays out there. And in Marlon Mack, I mean, if he gets 20 carries when he's gotten that sort of workload, he's been tremendous this season. So, and he's at 6K on DraftKings, 7,100 on FanDuel. So I actually think that Kevin makes some really good points about the total. And maybe that's where in tournaments you don't play these guys because Hilton's probably going to have 20% plus ownership on the DraftKings Millie Maker. And he makes a pretty good case to, maybe it isn't as high scoring. And when you throw Brissett in there, again, we can look at some of those high scoring numbers of the past and wonder whether or not we're going to see it again.
Yeah, I've just been waiting for Marlon Mack's ankle to get better. And with the time off, I absolutely love it. 7,100 on FanDuel. I like the Colts here too. I like the Colts. I'm telling you, I think, momentum, you talk about it, I don't think it's a bad thing that they had a bye week after the Kansas City game because, I think there's a huge letdown spot coming for the Texans. I mean, that was a huge win for them to go on the road and win that game. Colts had a week to kind of let everything die down a little bit and come back in a little bit more focused. So I'm on the Colts side on the betting side. Yeah, I want to see if they can protect Deshaun Watson again. That's been a real issue for them. Not just this year either. Another 1:00 game. I'd say both teams are disappointments, just to different levels. The Rams at the Falcons. So 1:00 Eastern time game. You get the Rams going east, of course. Atlanta's allowing 6.2 yards per play. I mean, this is historically horrible stuff there. It opened at LA -4. It was now LA -3. And I'm seeing it at even here, K-Raj. -3 and even. You seeing that or no?
Yep.
So, I mean, I find that to be a little bit interesting. The game total opened at 52.5. Now the over-under is at 54. The Rams defense has been awfully disappointing too. And listen, Matt Ryan, he'll fall behind 21-0, and they'll get this game back. I know it got pushed to 54, but I think it's the game total that's interesting to me, and I could see this one exceeding that. How about you?
You know, this I think is the most intriguing game of the week, even though these teams have been really bad recently, just because you say, all right, are the Falcons really that bad? And they did dig themselves that 27-10 hole. They came back against Arizona. They came back again with that late touchdown, but Matt Bryant missed the extra point. And I actually was on Arizona in that game. I was afraid that we were going to go to overtime and Atlanta was going to get a front door cover. I was so afraid of that Arizona had that game in the bag, and then they needed to get lucky with that missed extra point. But the Falcons back at home as an underdog, first time since the Philadelphia game back in week 2. And look, guys, you can argue with all these games. This could have happened. This could have happened. But my goodness, down 27-10 to Arizona, blown out by Houston, blown out by Tennessee. They were down that whole game against the Colts before they scored late. The Philadelphia game, they probably should have lost if it wasn't for the Julio Jones touchdown. In Minnesota, they weren't even in. So Atlanta's been terrible this whole season, but we're going on reputation because of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, and Devontae Freeman actually had a decent game against Arizona. But on the flip side, too, with the Rams, 3-0, looking good, maybe a Super Bowl contender, give up 55 to Tampa Bay, lose the Seattle game, and then just a no-show against San Francisco. I know Gurley didn't play, and Jared Goff's numbers were terrible. I don't know what to think of these two teams. Just by looking at the line, I probably want to side with the Falcons just because you're getting them at home as a dog. If you have two struggling teams, you might as well take the points out of these two teams and not lay it with LA going east. Now, they have gone east twice this year and won at Carolina and Cleveland, so we'll give them that. But also, this is a 1:00 game. The Cleveland game was a night game. The confidence, I think, is kind of shot a bit with the Rams and the Falcons. Again, I don't know if I'm just waiting for them or silly to play them, getting the points. But if you had to, as they say, put the gun to the head in this game, I'd probably take the points here with the Falcons.
Yeah, but the Falcons are just so bad.
I know.
They're just horrible in every facet. Their offense has been stagnant unless they fall behind. You know, they're playing catch up, which in DFS, Dan, we love. I mean, Matt Ryan is a top 3 fantasy quarterback this year. He doesn't move it with his legs, but he's got some tremendous weapons. We know Julio. We're waiting on Julio to get back in the end zone after a couple of huge games early in the season. They found him a lot last week. Calvin Ridley's been a little bit inconsistent, but he could have a blow-up game. Mohamed Sanu is still there. As we heard K-Raj bring up, Dan Quinn was very complimentary of Devontae Freeman too. So let's start on the Falcons side. Aqib Talib's down. He's on the IR too. And this is a Rams defense. It's not getting much pressure on the quarterback. I think we can look at the Falcons here and play some Falcons this week, can't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the more stackable games we have on the slate. And you talk about Matt Ryan and playing from behind. I mean, that's been the story all year long for them because their defense is a total disaster. And I think he's actually on pace to eclipse or come near like the single season yardage record. Like he's putting up that gaudy of numbers. And the frustrating thing again is Julio Jones not getting in the end zone, kind of like we've seen with, DeAndre Hopkins. He's had some really big games though. So he's a guy that, if you're playing some Matt Ryan, I think you're foolish if you're multi-entering and not teaming him up with Julio and maybe running it back with a Ram or two. So I'm fine with that. I mean, the ancillary wide receivers, I give a slight edge to Ridley over Sanu. I just think Ridley has multiple touchdown upside that Sanu doesn't have. And then Freeman, like he's 5.4K on DraftKings. He's been 18 fantasy points or more in 3 consecutive. And like you said, if Dan Quinn's talking him up a little bit, I mean, let's face it, Judge Ito Smith has been awful out there as their running back too. Everybody was excited about this cat, and he's done nothing. So I think Freeman deserves the reps, especially in a kind of faster paced game like this. Like, he's viable coming from behind, catching balls, which is a full point over there on DraftKings. So I like him a bit, but I mean, let's talk about the Rams, Holden. I mean, how can we not play these guys here? Like,
well, here's the deal. Everybody's going to be shied off of Jared Goff. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Are they though?
Yeah. Listen, everybody that plays these days in DFS seems to be really sharp, but I think recency bias still gets in a lot of people's heads, doesn't it? I mean,
the only bias I have is seeing guys like Marcus Mariota, guys like Kyler Murray, absolutely take the top off of this offense. And you've got Jared Goff, who admittedly, road splits aren't great, but he's got 3 outstanding weapons out there in Kupp, Cooks, and Woods. Coming off a bad offensive game, you got to think McVay is going to have them hyped up, ready to go. He's only 6.2 on DraftKings. Like, that is way too cheap. I think he might be the chalk for cash games on DK this week at that price point. And
I think as far as guys who have struggled, we're sitting here at 7,800 on FanDuel. How popular is he going to be on FanDuel? I mean, I can't imagine it. And I'm very happy Cooper Kupp busted, because maybe that'll take 2 or 3 percentage points off of him too. I mean, he'll be just about as chalky as any wide receiver has been this season. But for me, if you're going to go with a team against a bad team, I'll take the $100 and I'll go down to Jared Allen. I mean, Jared Allen's on FanDuel 7,700, but is Goff going to be low owned enough to play in a tournament?
Yeah, I mean, FanDuel's a little bit different animal because the salary is different there, and I think that we're not going to have nearly as much kind of quote-unquote chalk on FanDuel at that position as we will on DraftKings. And, Goff versus Josh Allen, man, can you believe we just even are, like, discussing these two things? Like, a year or two ago, we would have been laughing at a scenario that would have us play Josh Allen over Jared Goff. But that's how bad Miami has been this year. But I mean, I just think Goff has everything in his favor. It's a stackable game. I think he'll be pretty highly owned in GPPs, because we've seen, if you played the Rams and Tampa Bay stack 2 weeks ago or 3, whenever that was, 2-3 weeks ago, you won all the money, all of it on both sides, because you had Godwin go ham, you had Gurley go ham, you had Goff go ham. Everybody went crazy in that game. And that could easily happen here. You've got those sort of playmakers on the field, and we'll see what happens at the running back position. I think Gurley will end up going here, and he'll probably be overlooked. 7,100 on FanDuel, 6,400 on DraftKings. Fine for that price. You just worry whether or not he's going to make it throughout the entire game, but I doubt they bring him back unless he's healthy enough to go.
Yeah, if he's not back, I think that everybody that got burned by Malcolm Brown last week, now he's priced up to 6,100 on FanDuel. But he's questionable too. He got banged up a little bit. But if Brown's in there, I'm going right back to the well. And actually, I
think Henderson looked like the better running back. I mean, that dude has speed to kill.
But they use him on third down. They're not going to give him the carries.
Well, they didn't the last game, and they lost. So I don't think it's an impossibility, but you would need a lot of things to happen to kind of go that route. And that would certainly be only kind of a tournament side of things. But, Brown, you're right. I think a lot of people will be like hands off completely after what happened last week. That's the recency bias I think people will buy into. We've seen Jared Goff be good. And against this defense, he's going to throw 3 touchdowns. I'll lock and load. I mean, I don't know what that prop is, but take the over 2.5 touchdowns. He's throwing 3 in this game.
Yeah, don't run against San Francisco and don't take anything out of it, which is why, Brown last week was just a complete debacle. And this week it's an amazing matchup. So we'll see if Gurley can get in there. Last thoughts on this game real quick. K-Raj, I know you mentioned it a little bit, but this total being in the 50s, is this just a couple of struggling teams that are going to put up a ton of points?
Oh, mute.
Huh? I'm muted?
Let's try that again. Sorry. I'm back. Testing. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. That was for Holden.
I thought I was muted.
No.
So, hey, there
never.
you go.
You're never, Holden, you're never muted.
Oh, trust me. My wife likes to mute me all the time. Hey, 50s. It's the over-under in the 50s.
Yeah.
Over?
You know what? I'm going to go with the under.
Ooh, okay.
You know what? I'm going to go contrarian.
Excellent.
I think everyone wants the high-scoring game. We know the Falcons defensively are terrible. The Rams have been terrible as well. But, I mean, look, you want to go the flip side of the Rams, really wasn't that bad against the 49ers. I mean, it really wasn't that terrible. I mean, considering the last 2 weeks against Seattle and against Tampa Bay. So there was a bit of an improvement there. But you know what? This is one of those things. You're getting this total so high that everyone wants to go into the 30s. Maybe Atlanta plays a little bit better this week. And a little bit. I'm not saying a lot, but a little bit better. And you can get maybe a 27-24 game, something like that, you hope.
So you think we can see it move back down toward 52.5?
No, I think it'll keep going up because I think the public will want to ride that over, just seeing how bad Atlanta's been, but also knowing that Atlanta can score points, that it's not just Atlanta's defense is bad, that their offense, like you guys have said, that they've fallen behind in a lot of these games, and Matt Ryan's putting up a bunch of yards and points because they've fallen behind. But I don't know. There's just something about this game where I think coming home, not that they're playing for Dan Quinn's job. I don't think that's what it is. I just think the situation here that off this loss to Arizona, it is a tough loss on the road, but maybe they catch the Rams this week, and the Rams are a very beatable team when you look at it. I mean, look, they beat New Orleans without Drew Brees, and they were all kind of discombobulated with him out, and then they bring Bridgewater in. And the other two games, Cleveland was a close game, and even the Carolina game got close at the end. So it's not like the Rams have been dominant by any stretch either.
Yeah, I want to see the running back situation for the Rams before I really feel good. But this is a game that I want to have action on. I really and then it'll make me watch even more of the game. So I'm excited. Now, the last game, Cardinals, Giants, 1:00. I'm most interested in this from a DFS perspective. Giants -3, opened at 50. The over-under is now at 49. So before we get to the DFS side of things, these two teams are not very good. But K-Raj, at least the Giants have shown a pulse. They might be getting Saquon Barkley back this week. We don't know what the workload would be. They also are getting Evan Engram back this week. A lot of offensive injuries for this team. And on the Cardinals side, Kyler Murray, we see him turn the ball over quite a bit. He's starting to run a bit more, but I do not like the Cardinals on the road, and I can't believe that right now I'm looking at the Giants saying, hey, 3 points ain't bad.
I'm with you. I mean, look, you're asking Arizona to win their third straight game, and they built that 2-touchdown lead against Cincinnati, and Andy Dalton led them back to tie it late, and the Cardinals won it with a field goal. And like we mentioned before with the Cardinals-Falcons game, Arizona was great for a while, and they still almost lost that game if it wasn't for a missed extra point, that would have forced overtime. So Arizona, yeah, they have played better, obviously, this year with Cliff Kingsbury and with Kyler Murray than last year. Last year was a dumpster fire, and this year they've been better. They're not winning the NFC West. They're not going to make the playoffs. But I think with the Giants, though, there's got to be a little bit of confidence with Daniel Jones now that they feel better. Look, they hung with New England last week. That was not an easy spot for them with Saquon out, with a lot of guys out, and they still were in that game. Understandably, they had the defensive touchdown. They sacked Brady, and that was helpful. But also the Patriots scored a couple non-offensive touchdowns as well. So even though Daniel Jones wasn't great, he had that bad throw that got picked off by the sidelines, that I got to think the Giants feel a little better about themselves. And the only winnable game, I guess, quote unquote, they've had was the Washington game, and they blew out Washington, and that game is a favorite. So now they got another winnable game, Arizona going cross country. And I think with the Cardinals off 2 close wins, I got to think the Giants could be a look this week.
All right, we'll get back to the game total here in just a little bit. But, Dan, this is kind of juicy because we might see the Giants offense at full force. And that, to me, yeah, you say that with Eli, there's no chance. And it's not like Daniel Jones has been tearing it up in a DFS perspective. But if Shepard's back, then you got Tate, then you got Engram, then you got Saquon Barkley. This offense has got a lot of weapons, believe it or not. The question is Daniel Jones going to be able to step in and make enough of it, or is it going to be more Saquon? How do you feel? There's so many questions here, Dan. I just asked you 50 of them. So let's talk about the Giants offense. Let's just get to it.
I mean, I think Daniel Jones we can look at here a little bit. I mean, the last 2 games were really tough matchups against great defensive teams there in the Patriots and the Vikings. So this is an infinitely better matchup for him. And when you factor in that he's got Barkley back, he's likely got Engram back. Golden Tate didn't miss a beat last week. Shepard might be out, but still, like those, just putting those 2 guys is just a huge, huge bump to this offense. And he's 7,200 over there on FanDuel and 6,100 on DraftKings. That $6,100 number on DraftKings, it's tough because you can get Goff for just like 100 more in that crazy shootout. But 72 on FanDuel, I think, could be playable. And I think he's definitely a guy I'd have in my tournament player pool. And I think a sneaky way to play this game, too, is play him and Saquon together. I mean, Saquon's a guy who's going to catch 7 to 8 balls. And there's nothing better than when you get that running back to quarterback touchdown pass, and then you get all the other goodness that comes along with him rushing the ball. And that DK algorithm, man, they ever juice him up. 8,900 for Saquon Barkley this week. So they are expecting him to put up a monster game. I agree with it. I'm going to be playing him a lot. Maybe not in cash games at that price, but I will definitely be overweight on him in tournaments. And then Evan Ingram, he gets a date with the worst tight end defense in all of fantasy football. Everybody goes off, so he'll be mega chalk this week on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Kind of juiced up a little bit, but again, no Kelsey on this slate, so I think a lot of people will go there.
Yeah, you got Kittle, who's at 7,100 on FanDuel. Ingram's at 68, and then Austin Hooper at 66. Hey, we didn't even talk about him in that last game. All he is the number one scoring tight end in the NFL.
He's actually got more fantasy points than Julio Jones. I bet you most people did not expect that.
Every format, guy's over 100 points in PPR. He's going nuts. So Austin Hooper, and again, Dirk Cutter was listening to his press conference. All he did was talk him up. Absolutely. Yeah. There's 2 guys that got talked up more than anybody else by their coaches this week. Number 1 was Austin Hooper. Number 2 is Auden Tate, because Zach Taylor he's like, this guy is great, arrows up. So that's another guy, although we're not talking about the Bengals here. Yes.
Well, can I hit up on the Arizona side too? Because I think this is another very stackable game here. And I also think a play is to run Kyler out there and then run it back with Ingram and Saquon. I think this game has a high potential to shoot out. I mean, we finally had a 3-touchdown game from Kyler last week. The sad thing is, 2 of those touchdowns went to the running back and 1 went to a no-name tight end. So I think you can play Kyler this week and actually look at the receivers, though. I mean, the Giants this season, they've given up the third highest or the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and the 3rd most to wide receivers this season. So I think we can go to a price down Fitzgerald at 5'6", 6'1" on DraftKings. And then I'm going to throw another out there. I think this could be a Keyshawn Johnson week. He played in 81% of snaps last week. He's 3,900 on DraftKings, 46 near minimum over there on FanDuel. He really just has to get a touchdown in that scenario. David Johnson, probably a stay away for me this week. I mean, I just don't love the salary.
Disagree. See, I
love those 12 carries he gets, huh?
Right.
I mean, bailed you out with touchdowns.
Go look at what they're doing in the passing game here. And by the way, I loved my Chase Edmonds call from last week because he's getting as many carries now as David Johnson over the last couple of weeks, whether or not that's because of the back or the injury, whatever the hell. But if you're doing a game, you think this game's going to go high, I'm looking at a Kyler to David Johnson touchdown pass again. So I think your Saquon and Daniel Jones side is a really shrewd move. And I think that going Kyler with David Johnson in a GPP is another terrific move. And I don't – how high owned is it going to be with Kyler and Saquon and Johnson? And these are 3 guys that could go off.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is fit them all in. I mean, David Johnson's the 3rd highest priced running back on DraftKings. And he's 7th over there on FanDuel. Now, a lot of that has to do exactly with what you're talking about. He's getting all of his fantasy points in the passing game, and on DraftKings, they're worth twice as much as they are on FanDuel. But that is still a big price to pay, and I don't know that you're going to be able to fit Kyler, DJ, and Saquon in. If you went that route, you might need to just come off Saquon and play, Evan Ingram on the other side of a stack, or throw in a Golden Tate. But I mean, I do that all the time. Like, I've done that a lot this year. I don't hate it. I just don't like it when the prices are up on Kyler and the prices are up on DJ. The last few weeks, Kyler was still cheap, and you could stack those guys up. So I'm going to call for the wide receivers to do it this week. That you saw a get right spot for Adam Thielen a couple weeks ago. I mean, Fitz he's been okay. He's been boring, and I don't think he's ever going to just kind of have a smash game, but can he give us 80 and a touchdown or two? Absolutely, in this matchup. So he's just too cheap. 5.6 on FanDuel. I mean, it's a cash lock versus the Giants for me.
Do you ever onslaught?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So you want to save some salary? Play your Keyshawn Johnson, man.
I will. There you go.
That'll be great.
I will.
Keyshawn Johnson, maybe Damiere Byrd will come back, or Christian Kirk will do something. So if you're going to onslaught, I think there's tons of ways to save some money there. K-Raj, real quick, opened at 40 and opened at 50. It's down to 49.
Yeah, I'd follow the that number and go low. I mean, number one, look at the last 2 weeks who they played. They played the Patriots and the Vikings. So they played a couple tough defenses. So you would think, the Giants would score more. But also, looking back at it with Daniel Jones, all right, they scored 32 against Tampa Bay, but they were getting blown out, and Jones made the comeback. 24 against Washington, 24 combined the last 2 weeks. So the offense really hasn't been great. I know Saquon hasn't been there for the last 3+ games. But on the flip side,
that's a big deal, Kevin.
Is it? You think? But he's just going to come in. He's going to light up this offense. Because guess what, fellas? They scored 17 and 14 with Eli when Saquon was in there.
Yeah, but Daniel Jones is better than Eli. So, I mean, Saquon Barkley is like the best offensive player in the league. Like, he's worth some points.
I understand that, but you're just going to say that the Giants are going to score 31 this week now if he comes back?
Fight. I
would say I think there's a good chance that the Giants will score over 30 in this game. Absolutely. I think there's a very good chance that happens.
So I guess I'm kind of going against what I said about, they're facing two great defense the last 2 weeks. Then you get Arizona, who's terrible defensively. But, on the flip side, here's my problem with the Cardinals. They're just so inconsistent that they start games off well and then stink. They stink in the first half and then play well in the second half when they're down. They just can't put together a good game. That's what it is. And look, I would still go under, and you can have a Giants 31-10 win. So everyone wins. So Saquon gets the points if he plays. The Giants defense steps up. They don't play a great defense this week as they did the last 2 weeks. And Arizona comes back to life. So everybody wins. And Cliff Kingsbury's hair is still brushed nicely.
Did you learn something about DFS today with our onslaught?
Yeah, and he's like my favorite Pirates catcher, Don Slot, right?
Yeah.
Don Slot.
My guy was Benny DiStefano, the only left-handed catcher that I've ever seen. He was with the Pirates too. Just real quick, onslaught, of course, is just putting a whole bunch of guys in the same game. And if you are a sports bettor, you haven't tried DFS out yet, I highly recommend it. And if you do props, yeah.
Can I just say one thing to our audience? I've known Holden Kushner for over 15 years. That's the first time I've made him laugh in 15 years. So I feel proud about it. First time legitimately laughing. I feel good about myself today.
I don't even know what I was laughing about. The Don Slot thing?
That's what it was.
Because I was so uncomfortable. I needed to let out a nervous laugh, K-Raj. Hey, you're doing a great job over there at Vegas Insiders. Give us a little bit of info before we get out of here.
All right, past the NFL, obviously, we have NBA starting next week, and the college football continues, the baseball playoffs, the NHL. So very busy time here at VegasInsider.com to check out our picks and our articles, all of that. You can check me out on Twitter at VIRogers, ROGERS.
Let's go.
Hey, K-Raj, are you working on your XFL power rankings after the draft here today?
As we speak, I just got done with the WNBA season, so I got to move over to the XFL.
You clean up on WNBA, don't you?
You can. I didn't. I was okay. I was a little streaky this year. But look, guys, it's like anything else. If you just follow it, you can find winners. Simple as that.
Dan Bach, please. The RotoGrinders legend. I know we got RotoGrinders. I know we got the Sharpside app. I know we got the RotoGrinders sports betting. So please inform our wonderful audience.
Yeah. If you haven't been to rotogrinders.com, come on. I mean, check it out. Daily fantasy. We do every sport. NBA starting up soon. And we've got shows right up until roster lock. And you have to be paying attention to NBA because basically news dictates how you're building your lineups. But I'm doing something special this week for college football. I know it's not eligible for everybody in different states. I know Holden can't play out there in Colorado. But what you can do, Holden, you go to StateKings.com. And you can buy a share of my lineups. I'm putting up a staking out there on Stake King. So you can buy a percentage of my teams in the big GPP on DraftKings this week. And if I hit, then you hit. So it's a fun way to kind of basically get a sweat with me. So we do that every now and then. And I've got a package posted over there on StakeKings.com. We're a partner with them. And it's a fun way to maybe sweat college football, even if you can't build teams or know that much about it. So give it a try this week.
So if you win, I love you. And if you don't, then I send you horrible text messages.
Yeah,
is this how it works?
that's the pressure of the whole staking world is that if you lose, you're also losing some other people's money too. But I think I got like 65% of myself and then 35% out to other people. So I've got plenty of skin in the game. So.
Yeah, and if K-Rod screws up his pick, his guaranteed pick, I mean, listen, people
get their money back.
They get their money back. Well, I mean, you don't get the money back that you lost, but you get your money back for the pick, and nobody has K-Rod's number. You know, you on the other hand, there's a lot of problems there. For me, I might be living in Denver, but I still got my capital behind me. Let's go Nats.
True.
All right, let's go Nats. Wrap this thing up as we're sitting here on Tuesday. So everybody knows already what happened. Follow me on Twitter at Holder Radio. Dan?
At Dan_Bach, B-A-C-K.
B-A-C-K. K-Raj?
V.I. Rogers.
I'm doing 12 shows a week, guys, and this is one of my favorite. Absolutely love doing this show. Love both sides of things. Great work for Dan, for K-Raj. I'm Holden Kushner. Devin back in Nashville. Take care. Good luck this week. Have a fun time prepping for all these wonderful games.